Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is Saturday, TowerGate Day 345, February the 17th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, of course, the big news of yesterday was that Mueller came out with Rosenstein giving the statement that he has filed indictments on 13 Russians and 3 Russian companies for interfering in the 2016 election. You know, the first thing I thought when I heard that come across the newswire was that months and months and months ago, on a TowerGate video, I talked about the fact that the best way that Mueller could extricate himself from this situation would be to come up with some finding that feeds into the Russian narrative and say, yeah, well, after all my investigation, I found that the Russians interfered in the 2016 election. Bad Russians. Bad Russians. And I said at that time that's probably what he would do. That's how he would extricate himself from the situation and try to save face. And so it's just funny here months and months later that this is what he actually does. I was only partially joking. But I guess that's all he's got. But I'm going to try to go through this. I haven't read this entire thing, the indictments in detail. I scanned through a lot of it, a quick read, just to get a general idea of what it's all about. And to me, it's a bunch of nothing. Essentially, unless he can get these Russians on stealing some identities or engaging in some financial transactions that were unlawful or anything like that, essentially what these individuals are being accused of is trolling. I don't think trolling is against the law. The overall amount of trolling that he points out is minuscule. Minuscule. When you take the total amount of media, Rotten Reverend Clinton had $1.2 billion. The entire media on her side. The entire DOJ, FBI, Obama administration, State Department, CIA, foreign governments, New World Order, European Union, the British government. She had all this, what would probably equal $10 billion worth of media propaganda on behalf of the Rotten Reverend Clinton. Compared to this minuscule amount, it's like putting a raindrop into a 55-gallon barrel of rainwater. It's a drop in the bucket, a big bucket. I don't even know how he'll even get convictions. He's probably going to have to come up with some other sort of crimes linked to this, like money laundering or stealing identities or something, because trolling is not a crime. And then you've got to tie that to the Russian government. This was a private individual that owned this company and the 3 companies. And the grassroots organizing and things they did, well, I mean, they did organization in support of Bernie Sanders most of the time. It was mostly supporting Bernie. There was anti-Trump, there was pro-Trump. There was anti-Hillary, there was pro-Hillary. So it was all a wash. It wasn't like it was a massive campaign targeted at one person. It was just a bunch of mishmash. There was just not a lot there. But they come out and give this press conference and make it sound real official. We've got indictments against 13 Russians and 3 Russian companies. It's a bunch of nothing. And these Russians, they'll lawyer up and probably, I doubt that they'll even be indicted. But Rosenstein and Uncle Bob know this. They know that 2 days from now, everyone will forget all about it. There probably won't even be any trials or any hearings. Case will probably be dismissed. Because they're going to have to produce more if they're really going to tie this to the Russian government and tie it to anything more than just a bunch of trolling. I mean, you could easily make the argument that the DOJ and the FBI had a much greater influence on the 2016 election than, you know, some bots who got 59,000 views on a Facebook post. It's a bunch of nothing, my friends. That's what it is. This was Uncle Bob looking for a way to get off the bus before it goes over the cliff with him behind the wheel. He needs to extricate himself from the situation somehow, and this is where he went. The low-hanging fruit. Because you can always dig up some stuff like this, because everybody meddles in everyone's politics. It was just 5 or 6 years ago that Putin booted out all the American NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, because they were there in Russia working on behalf of the intelligence agency for the United States to do the exact same thing that we're accusing the Russians of doing here, except for the fact that it really was the government with the CIA. And Putin kicked all those NGOs out. They were trying to sow political discourse in Russia, but they were targeting Putin specifically to get rid of him. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, do you think Uncle Bob discovered the meddling with the Ukrainian government? We all remember that story, don't we? From back in, let's see, what was it? Summer of 2017, I guess. We learned that there was the Democratic National Committee was actually coordinating with the Ukrainian government against Trump. Did he find that collusion between the DNC and the Ukrainian government? He doesn't mention anything about that. How about meddling by the British intelligence? Do you think maybe he discovered the Obamas meddling in the Israeli elections when they tried to take down Netanyahu in his most recent re-election bid? Do you think they discovered anything there? I think not. And another thing, Rodenstein and Mueller both know that they're going to be facing questions about what they did in the Uranium One deal, overlooking all those Russian crimes, real crimes, failing to tell the Congress, the committees that oversee that type of thing, allowing that deal to go through and not speaking up and saying anything. So Mueller and Rodenstein needed cover on their deep six for what they know is coming. The questions about how they let the Russians off the hook and allowed the Uranium One deal to go through. So now they can sit back and say, hey, what do you mean we let Russians off the hook? We just got through indicting 13 Russians and 3 Russian companies. Does that sound like we're guys who would let the Russians off the hook? This was the low-hanging fruit. The Russian meddling that Rodenstein laid out was no comparison to the meddling that was going on with the Rotten Reverend Clinton campaign, Confusion GPS, the British government, Christopher Steele, a British foreign agent, the FBI, the DOJ, the CIA, the State Department, the entire European Union, corporate media, and the $1.2 billion, a lot of it coming from the Saudis, Chinese, and Soros-backed NWO types. There is your real collusion, and actually could have had a major impact on the election. That's what Uncle Bob should have discovered. It was far more important, far greater importance of what was going on there with the DOJ, the FBI, the Clinton campaign, the dossier, Christopher Steele, all that stuff. Far more important, far more damaging, far more criminal than anything that these Russian bots did, or that these 3 Russian companies did. What they did had very little effect, if any at all. In fact, even Rodenstein said it had no effect on the elections. And as far as whether or not it's criminal behavior, well, I guess, but, you know, it's social media. Anyone can go on social media and launch a campaign in support or of any candidate they want, or to attack any candidate they want. The fact that it's coming from a foreign entity, so what? I mean, you know, the internet is global, you know. So I really don't see where this is any big deal at all. It's a smokescreen. It's cover for Uncle Bob and Rodenstein to get themselves off the bus before it goes over the cliff, and to provide cover to them when they're being questioned about how they treated the the Uranium One deal and how they overlooked the crimes, the real crimes of the Russian government. That was the real crime. Bob Mueller's digging around for this kind of garbage when in fact you had this massive criminal conspiracy around the Uranium One deal, which he was a part of. He looked right past that. So he went for the low-hanging fruit so that he could get a quick exit off the bus and cover his six, along with Rodenstein, for what's coming in the future when they're questioned about what they failed to do during the Uranium One sale. That's what all this looks like to me. It's nothing. It's just nothing. And again, I would be surprised if they convict anybody. These Russians will lawyer up and, or how are you going to tie them to Putin and his government? I guess if you can do that, maybe you can do something. But even then, I mean, it's nothing new. I mean, we involve ourselves and meddle in elections all over the world. The Brits do it. The Israelis do it. The EU does it. Everybody does it. Of course the Russians do it. I mean, we knew back in the 60s that the Russians were behind a lot of the anti-war protests, the Vietnam War protests. They were behind a lot of that. They were stirring up a lot of things because they like to see the U.S. in chaos, particularly back in the days of the Soviet Union. So, I mean, this is nothing new. This is low-hanging fruit. You could appoint any prosecutor at any time in our history, at any time, to say, okay, find some evidence of Russians meddling in our affairs. That's easy. You could pull that out of your hat. And the Russians could find us meddling in their affairs. And any country can find foreign governments meddling in their affairs. All countries do it. All countries do it. This is nothing. This is a big, fat nothing, is what this really is. So, no big deal to me. I heard it come across the radio and I just chuckled. It's not anything that's going to amount to anything, except for to give Uncle Bob and Rodenstein cover for the upcoming Uranium One hearings when they're going to be forced to testify and explain their lack of action regarding the real Russian crimes that were going on in the real Russian government games that were being played. This was just a way for them to extricate themselves from the situation and give themselves some cover for what's coming in the future. That's what this all boils down to, in a nutshell. And when you look at the numbers that they're showing, well, here's an ad that ran and it had 29,000 views. 29,000 views? I mean, the Rotten Reverend Clinton had 5 media networks, every major newspaper, internet ads running on every single page. Every time you go anywhere during the 2016 campaign, you would get a Hillary Rotten Clinton ad popping up. It was millions and millions and millions of dollars with probably hundreds of thousands and millions of views on all sorts of public media campaigns that were going on, from the Rotten Reverend campaign as well as all the other associated Democrat campaigns that were running in association with that. I mean, it's nothing. It's a bunch of nothing. It's a bunch of nothing. My oh my. I certainly hope someone calls this out before it gets too far down the road. Someone within the next 2 or 3 days that has major publication, has major, views, a major newspaper, Fox News. Somebody needs to blow the whistle on this entire thing. I certainly hope Fox News doesn't jump on the bandwagon and say, well, there it is. There's the proof. It was the Russians. Yep, we've caught them again, meddling in our elections. I mean, hopefully Fox News won't bite on this. They probably will. But I'm not going to bite on it. It's a bunch of BS. It's about nothing. Mueller needed something to get him out of this situation he's in. And this was it. The low-hanging fruit. This is what he went for. And this is his way off the bus. And also for him and Rodenstein to cover themselves and what's coming up. Plus, they know what's coming out with the IG report. They know. And they know it's time to go, to wrap it up. But I wouldn't be surprised if Uncle Bob tries to keep it going, because that was the original plan for the coup d'etat, is to try to keep it going. So let's move on for a moment to something else. Okay, we have the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, calling for Christopher Wray Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray, the director of the Federal Bureau of I'm With Her, calling for Ray to step down. Says he should, or I think he should, but not for that reason. You know, I mean, you could look at not just this failure, obviously it was a major failure, but Charleston and Orlando were both major failures by the FBI as well. Didn't hear anybody calling for anybody to step down then. But there's so many failures of the FBI, and there's a comment, someone left a comment in the comment section on my previous video laying out about a half a dozen major failures and criminal activities that the FBI has been involved in over the years. I mean, so, you know, as far as this specific case, to ask Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray to step down because this FBI field office that received the call didn't follow up or whatever, you know, I think Christopher Ray should step down only because I just don't think he's got the right mindset for the job. The job needs someone to come in and clean up the mess. Christopher Ray is a career DOJ bureaucrat who's like every other career DOJ or FBI bureaucrat. They're interested in their retirement. Christopher Ray is 1.5 years away from retirement. He just wants to cruise his last 1.5 years, collect his retirement, and go home. I mean, he's not interested in turning the tables, upsetting the apple cart, fixing the problems, turning that place upside down, which is what it needs. That's why I think he should go. As far as Christopher Ray, to finger him personally because of the failures of the FBI in this particular case in the Florida shooting is kind of not fair, really. And I'm not defending Christopher Ray in a general scale, but on this specific point, I mean, he's the head of the FBI. He's over the entire FBI. The mistake that was made here was made with the local field office. I believe the first call came into the Virginia office. Now, what they should have done is that they should have contacted the local jurisdiction, which would have been in Florida, South Florida FBI office, and said, hey, we got this call. There's this individual that's in your community. You need to follow up on this. He made this threat or whatever. It never made it there. And so that is a failure on the behalf of the field agents in Virginia and in Florida, or whoever in that link, in that chain, who did not follow protocol and just didn't take care of it. And, you know, there's probably some local law enforcement issues here as well, because it appears that the police have been on 35 calls to this dude's house, to the shooter's house. 35 times they've been called there for various reasons. And so he was very well known. And as I understand, if I read the story correctly, there was over 20, not just this one, but over 20 times people were notified. School officials, law enforcement, people telling parents. There's 20 recorded, we know of 20 or so times that have been recorded that people had made complaints about this individual being kind of crazy and someone needing to take a look and check him out and see what's going on with this guy. So there was massive multiple failures on multiple levels. And it shouldn't surprise us, because the FBI has proven himself to be incompetent and corrupt. Again, we could go back and look at Charleston and Orlando and look at the failures there. And we could go, how far back do you want to go? I mean, the Murrow building in Oklahoma bombing, Oklahoma City bombing. Let's talk about the first bombing of the World Trade Center. I mean, they provided the terrorist with the bomb. They radicalized him, recruited him, trained him, radicalized him, provided him with the bomb, and let him blow it all up. That is what happened. So, I guess at this point I would have to say this is all about nothing. I don't believe that Christopher Ray is going to step down as a result of this or anything like that. But there will be some people probably getting their stones busted down there at the local field office in Virginia for not passing this along, not passing protocol. And now Jeff Sessions wants to investigate. Yes, Jeff Sessions has ordered a review. The eager beaver, the overachiever, is woken from his slump, and now he's decided that someone needs to have a review of the FBI. Well, you know, welcome to the party, Jeff. It's good you could join us. Of course, we have the rotten Reverend Clinton attacking the gun sellers after the shooting. And, of course, we have a leak now from Mueller, someone on Mueller's team leaking to Bloomberg that Trump is not cleared in the Russia probe. He's not cleared. It's still going on. And by the way, who approved of the visas that allowed these Russians into the country to do their work? None other than John effin' Kerry. Thank you very much. There you go. And by the way, one last thing. The Florida shooter was on meds, including antidepressants for ADHD and OCD, and other drugs that we don't even know about. So anyway, there you go. Kind of a shortened edition. I'm running out of battery, but thank you so much for tuning in to the Saturday edition. I'll be back tomorrow and with a full TowerGate video for Sunday. You guys have a good night. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.